New Buddha-ware Dhamma Talks. Geoff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
Right, well, today's talk is about loving kindness, Metta. And of course, when we hear the word love, the first thing that comes to mind probably are those people who are very close to us, our family, a certain person that I love very much. You may also think of it in terms of sex. The concept of love is really quite confused and confusing. But I want to make a distinction today between what I call ordinary love, which is a good thing, and spiritual love. Not too keen on the word spiritual, but we haven't got any other words, so we'll have to just keep your minds open. You'll see that in the Metta Bhavana practice, we were actually testing ourselves with not the concept of love, not with talking about love, but with actually feeling some love, even to someone that perhaps I don't like very much, or I might even hate. I might not have forgiven for things they have said or done. This makes love very difficult, of course. But that's the challenge. That's the challenge that we all have to overcome if we too are going to be happy and peaceful. So first of all, ordinary love. Well, the characteristic thing about love of any kind is that it's some form of giving of oneself. When we talk of ordinary love, we're talking about giving of oneself, but in a limited way. So we draw certain lines around it. This person I love, this person I don't, this person I dislike, etc. Now those lines can be a little bit wobbly and they can change depending on, for example, whether one feels betrayed by a certain person. That could be a serious wobble to what is normally a line of ordinary love for someone. But if there's no love of this sort, then there's no such thing as betrayal. So is there something that can overcome feelings of betrayal? Is there an even greater love? Well, a lot of wise people over the centuries have said yes, but we have to understand it and we have to work for it. Ordinary love, like all love, is a giving of oneself, but it is a conditioned giving of oneself. It doesn't transcend those boundaries. The word transcend, you might not be terribly familiar with it, but it's very useful actually in the sorts of things we talk about. Transcend meaning going beyond. So in this case, going beyond the boundary of family, etc. I love my family, or I love my nation, nationalism. But to transcend these boundaries is to go beyond them, to open one's mind, to go even wider. In ordinary love, there isn't usually very much mindfulness, but when there is mindfulness, then we begin to see the nature of those boundaries and how wobbly they can be. And that might help to change our attitude. The ordinary love is usually not transcending. It has boundaries around it. Sexual, erotic, family, friendships. The Greeks had a word, xenia, X-E-N-I-A. It's a lovely word meaning a kind of hospitality love, or love for people that I don't know. Like in the Bible, there's the talk of the Good Samaritan. Xenia, X-E-N-I-A. Xenia meaning hospitality love. That is some love I give to someone that maybe is a guest or a visitor or someone that I've bumped into. And that's quite a high level of love. We're now starting to approach where that boundary is. And the person who stopped to help the Samaritan had to transcend that boundary. So another way of putting it is that ordinary love has behind it some sort of concern with oneself, protecting oneself or furthering oneself, some sort of gain. And it can all become very confused, actually, in one's mind and one's heart. If one questions oneself as to how I feel about this person, there are some rather wobbly lines there. But lines which I may hold on to because they give me something very precious to me, which is security. So I want to transcend the impermanence of things, and having a partner or a spouse that I can trust makes me feel very good, very solid, very stable, very secure. And that's all well and good. Nobody's against that, no. But ordinary love can be, if you like, enhanced by a deeper sense of love for human beings. Human beings in their chaos, conflict, foolishness, but also the power they have of freedom to be loving and caring and work together for the good. The thing about ordinary love is that it is also susceptible to degradation, to wearing away, sometimes into its opposite, actually, into hatred. What started off as love can gradually become hatred. There are many different reasons for this, which we can't go through, but it's a feature of all kinds of ordinary love, is that there's always that risk. For example, it's well known, and we see it ourselves, that love can turn into possessiveness. Love can turn into control. Love can turn into care for a person as long as they give you what you want. This is a sort of paradoxical love, which many of us live with in our ordinary lives. One day I feel I really love somebody. A week later I feel I hate their guts. Quite a rigmarole, isn't it? Or I might be lucky enough to feel love towards them most of the time. So the thing about giving of oneself, which is what I suppose loosely speaking love is that it can be, as long as I get this from you, I can continue to give of myself. So it's a provisional exchange. I give you this, and you give me this, and I'll give you that. Which, when you think about it, is not terribly stable. What if, for perfectly good reasons, somebody's not able to give something at a certain point in their lives? What happens then? We're going to abandon them or give up on them or whatever. There are novels and plays about this sort of situation. Okay, the thing about ordinary love also is that very often reasons can be given for loving a person. I love him or her because, and then there's a string of reasons. I love him because he's very patient with me. Now, things change when it becomes a spiritual kind of love. Because if you think about love in a way, always has the potential to be unconditional, and then reasons become irrelevant. So if I say, why do you love so-and-so? Oh, because he's very patient, he's quite kind, he's quite generous, especially with money, etc. So I've got a whole string of reasons. It may not have occurred to you that one could go on loving somebody even if they don't fulfill any reasons. You might ask a person, why do you love so-and-so? And the answer might be, well, I don't know, actually. I just love that person. Because it doesn't actually require a reason. And now we're at that limit to transcend, the limit of the difference between ordinary love and spiritual love. Spiritual love doesn't need any reasons to love somebody. It's difficult to understand, isn't it? But in a way, it's quite an everyday thing, if you think about it. If you leave a person because of they are not meeting a particular standard or criterion or reason, then you begin to wonder, well, how deep was that love? It was an ordinary, provisional, and conditional form of love. But when reasons become irrelevant, yes, he is a loudmouth. Yes, he is prideful. Yes, he spends too much money without consulting me, blah, 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 blah. But I still love him or her. Possible? It's perfectly possible. In fact, if it's not possible, then spiritual love is not possible. Because spiritual love is about forgiving everybody, in a sense, that I bump into, even if there are no reasons for loving them. Reasons have got nothing to do with it in this case. The spiritual love then is unconditioned. It's a difficult thing. It's not easy. And I don't want you to think that I'm saying there's some sort of sharp barrier between unconditional love and conditioned love. They blur into each other. And conditional love can be enhanced by unconditioned or unconditional love. So spiritual love is universally self-sacrificing. That is, potentially, I will give anything for this person. On the higher spiritual level is that I will make sacrifices for other people, even those I don't know, or even perhaps for all living things. Now this becomes challenging, but it's also very liberating, every step one can take in that direction, even if it's just avoiding killing insects. Think about spiritual love, it's whole embracing, it's holistic, it's unifying, it brings everything together, it doesn't look for boundaries all the time. And it's joyful when one sees the happiness or peacefulness of another sentient being. What has mindfulness got to do with all of this? Well, mindfulness is that keyhole that leads us in, that helps us to transcend our ordinary understanding of things and move beyond that boundary of I love him or her because. So mindfulness, remember, is a kind of attention, in this case, attention to another person, or it could be an animal, another attention to another person, in a knowing sort of way, in a way in the sense that one knows what one is feeling in that attention. Okay. So there's the phrase I rather like, which comes from a philosopher called Gabriel Marcel, a Frenchman from the last century, who created this sense of spiritual availability, making yourself spiritually available to others. Or we could also describe it as open-heartedness. If I am making myself spiritually available, then I'm acting in such a way that is honest but compassionate, that is open to the differences between us, not making hard boundaries, I am spiritually available to others. I think that's a beautiful phrase, one to think about. Spiritual availability means dissolving boundaries, moving towards selflessness. Now remember, this is not an on-off thing. It's not like, either I love everybody or I don't love anybody. It's somewhere in between that we move back and forth. But with mindfulness, we become more and more aware of our tendencies with this mysterious thing called love. Now, I just want to finish it with a quotation from Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Zen master, now in his 90s. Thich Nhat Hanh says this about love for yourself. Now, remember how we started the Metta practice? We said, imagine yourself in the mirror. Imagine caring about yourself, respecting yourself. He says this, love is the capacity to take care, to protect, to nourish, and if you are not capable of generating that kind of energy towards yourself, if you are not capable of taking care of yourself, of nourishing yourself, or protecting yourself, it is very difficult to take care of another person. In the Buddhist teaching, it's clear that to love oneself is the foundation of the love of other people. That deserves some thinking about. That a dislike or sense of worthlessness or hesitations about one's worth are obstacles to caring for other people. Now, when he says, of course, when he talks about love for yourself and how important it is, he is not talking about conceited love. Not talking about I love myself because I'm such a great person in every way. That's conceit. This is a quiet, non-bragging respect for oneself. Again, it's another balance that one has to think about. No one's asking you to do all of this at once. All we're asking, with understanding, gradually comes a change in attitude and in how one feels about oneself and others. So it goes on, in the Buddhist teachings, it's clear that to love oneself is the foundation of the love of other people. Love is a practice, he says. Love is truly a practice. Often giving up feelings of contempt for oneself are a very difficult thing to do, but it undermines everything else. How can one really have any love for other people if one doesn't really have any love for oneself in a non-conceitful sort of way? So I think that's an important point that perhaps you'd like to discuss. So there are several things to discuss there. Ordinary love, spiritual love, the role of mindfulness, love for yourself. One more thought, which is rather a big thought, and that is that love as a social dimension. We meet people, well, all the time, all of us are given to be somewhere on a spectrum between a kind of romanticism about human beings, which you often find in Mahayana Buddhism. I think it goes a little bit over the top with love, 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 love. The other opposite is kind of pessimism or cynicism, which is basically the belief that human beings are just a bad lot. And the world would be a better place if we were not here. I laugh because I find this, this is sort of extremism. But unfortunately, it's very self-destroying, very self-destructive, and a great obstacle to moving ahead with any understanding of what the Buddha's teaching is. A pessimist or a cynic is that put themselves in a position where they're incapable of understanding the teachings of the Buddha, or indeed anything spiritual. I think I can say that. I do believe that. So there's a spectrum here from pessimism through to realism, which is the application of wisdom to any situation, and to see into someone else's unpleasantness could be due to previous hurts, for example. From pessimism to realism, and then going over the top, where I just brag a lot about loving everybody, basically, and don't see the realities of the world. I have to be able to wisely cope with everything, whether it's joy or misery. It's all a lesson for us. So I'll stop there, except now just to say that what we're talking about now, this Metta Bhavana, this making oneself available, spiritually available, love for others, it is not an add-on. It's not something that we add on to the Buddha's teachings. This is the dimension of the very same teaching that he gives us, whatever he's talking about. But when we talk about concentration, you think, what's concentration got to do with it? Well, it's got to do with that business of the boundaries, and we know the boundaries are tied up with love or non-love, and breaking down boundaries. So there's one teaching here, and so much importance can be attached to this, because it is another way in, a parallel path to becoming enlightened.
New Buddha Way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.